Hi, welcome back. Well, now we finally begin creating some web pages. Let's do some code. Sounds like fun, huh? Now in front of you, you see what looks like a really boring page, but we got to start somewhere. We're going to pay our dues a little bit. We're going to learn how to build this. The other thing we're going to do in this introductory unit is to take a look at the tools that we want to use to actually build our code. Now there are a lot of options, but I'm going to make some suggestions here. And my suggestions are based on a couple of things. I want it powerful, I want it easy to use, and I want it free. Whenever possible, I will only recommend free tools, and that is pretty much always possible. So I really recommend that you use some powerful tools to do your work, but whenever possible, they be free. And there's some great tools throughout all of game development. Now, we'll look at this page, but let's go ahead and talk about our tools right now for a moment. One thing you may notice is the web browser I am using. I am using Chrome. There are many good web browsers, but to do HTML5 gaming in particular, you need to use a reasonably modern browser. Chrome is very well known for its support of HTML5. It's also got some great features for programmers. So it is my favorite browser for doing HTML5 web development, and in fact most web development. My least favorite browser is any form of Internet Explorer. Even the very latest version of it still doesn't tend to do everything we want it to do for HTML5. It still doesn't exactly work as well as I want. If you're using Internet Explorer, i.e. You probably will be frustrated. So I'm going to really recommend you download a copy of Chrome for any operating system you may be using. Just you can just do a search for Chrome, you'll find it right there. I happen to be using Windows today. I will use Windows for most of the examples in this lecture, but you do not have to be a Windows kind of person to do this stuff. I personally use all three of the major operating systems, Windows, Mac, and Linux. And I've written these programs in all of those languages, or all of those environments, no problem. I also use both of the major mobile environments, iOS, which is the iPhone, iPad operating system, and Android. In fact, you can do development on your mobile devices as well in iOS or Android, but I think by far the easiest way to go is through by using a desktop with a high-end browser like Chrome. Firefox is also good, so is Safari, but I think you're going to find the least frustrating experience with Chrome. If you don't have the latest version of it, go ahead and get it. It's going to make your life a little bit easier. So we'll look at it in Chrome, and very soon you'll see some interesting things. The other thing that you'll need is some sort of a text editor. Now, if you're in Windows, you could just use Notepad. If you're on a Mac, you could use TextEdit. Please don't use either of those. They will cause you frustration. Notepad just doesn't have enough features. Apple's TextEdit does have enough features, but they're the wrong ones. It will mess you up. I am just promising you. So I really recommend that you get yourself a high-end text editor. Well, which one should you get? There's many out there. My personal favorite is this one called Komodo Edit. You can do a Google search for Komodo Edit. I'll put a link on the page. But you can also just, search for it. You can look at the address I've got here. Now be careful. They also have a commercial editor called Komodo IDE. You have to pay for that. Komodo Edit, the free version, is what I recommend. It has more than enough for our needs. There is no need to purchase an editor. But I do like Komodo Edit. I'm going to go ahead and show it to you right now. There is Komodo Edit, and it has the Adventures of Gugu. There's the game, and then we can look at it in the editor and see what it really looks like. So you can tell right away, even if you don't know exactly what's going on with this page, why I like a high-end editor. It gives me like color formatting. Ooh, that's nice. So different kinds of things are in different colors. That turns out to be really handy when things get messy, and I promise you they will. It supports some other neat things, like I can hide and show various portions of my code. That gets really handy when things get complicated too. It knows that I'm writing HTML code right now, and it will give me some tips as we do that. It turns out the same thing is true. It also knows the other two languages we'll use throughout this course, CSS and JavaScript. And so when you start writing something, it'll try to help you. For example, sometimes we use something called a style. And watch this as I start to type it. Oh, it says, oh, you want a style. And it knows that a lot of times I might say type, and it'll even give me suggestions about that. That's pretty nice. Yeah, so I really like a high-end editor that we can use to edit our files. All of the various files we make, these HTML web pages, the CSS style documents, the JavaScript code, all of these various documents are nothing more than plain text. So you don't need anything fancy, you don't need anything powerful, but you do want an editor you can trust. So I really like this one. It has all of the standard things you'd expect to save, load, copy, and so on. So it's pretty useful. I really like this. We don't need all the fancy things. I don't want the bottom. I mean, you can turn on panels and fancy stuff, but we don't need much. We just need it to help us edit text. Good? Good. Okay, so let's take a look at our web page again. So I'm looking at this page. All of the pages that I ever talk about are available in the Lecture 1. So when you look at Lecture 1 of this section, you'll see I've given you a list of links, and you can click on all of these. You might say, wait, yeah, sure, I can see the finished page, but where do I see the code for making that page? This is so wonderful. This is my favorite part of web development. The most important key in all of web development, Control-U. What? Okay. It's trying to control you. No, not that kind of Control-U. On any browser, there is a tool for viewing the page source. Almost always the shortcut for that is Control-U. So I'm using that Control-U command to take a look at the underlying instructions. So in a sense, this is the cookie. This is what we're looking at. I'm not talking those evil web cookies, which, by the way, aren't evil. This is a cookie. This is a recipe for making cookies. This is, okay, the cake. This is the recipe for making cakes. So when we see a web page, we're seeing the results of some instructions, and we want to look underneath at the instructions. And the instructions are typically called source code. Okay, that makes sense. So this is the HTML source code. And it's a funky little language, but it really is kind of cute. And it really is relatively sensible. Here's the great thing. Any web page you look at, anywhere on the web, you can view the source and you can see how it works. A lot of times they'll be real complicated and messy. But we're going to start pretty simple. Alright, so let me explain all this. Can we go through this whole thing? Sure, don't worry. First thing we've got, line 1, is this doc type thing. What that does is that explains to the browser what kind of stuff I'm looking at. Is this a web page? Is this an image? Is this a sound effect? What is this? And so doc type HTML explains what's going on. You do actually have to type this, although a lot of your tools, like Komodo, will have some helper code, some templates, so you don't have to memorize everything. You do have to have that exclamation point at the beginning. And you use these angle braces to indicate, hey, I'm giving instructions to the browser. So stuff inside the angle braces is basically instructions. It's formatting hints. And the stuff inside the regular text, well, is content. Okay, it's not formatting hints. It's really meaning hints. We'll get to that distinction. Okay, so take a look. And what do you see here? Well, I see something interesting. In line 2, I see HTML. And in line 16, I see /HTML. They kind of fit as a pair. And then in line 3, I see head. In line 6, I see /head. In line 7, I see body. In line 15, I see /body. Oh, /head, /body sounds like some sort of a horror movie. But it's not. It's much more pleasant than that. What we're saying is that we have a component called the head, and it can contain certain kinds of information. Almost all of the components in HTML have a beginning and an end. They're containers. They hold things. And so the head holds certain kinds of things, and the body holds other kinds of things. Sure, I'll talk about exactly what they are, but look at the bigger picture first. For the vast bulk of these elements, they have a beginning and end. Title /title. H1 /H1. P/P. Oh, that's neat. There's a few exceptions. I'll explain them as we go. They're not that hard to understand. Okay, I'm following this. You following this? Okay, cool. So we've got a web page that, after the doc type, is contained inside an HTML/HTML pair. Okay, got that. Everything else is inside this because it's all part of the HTML page. Roger, got that one. Okay, inside that we have two main sections. We've got the head and we've got the body. Now the header area reminds me of the engine compartment of a car. It's very critical. It's got important stuff in there. But when you go to drive a car, you don't get in there, you get in the main passenger area. That doesn't mean that the engine compartment is unimportant, exactly the opposite. The passenger area is where people go, but a lot of the really most important parts of the car are in the engine compartment. The header area is like that. In this early code, the header area is not going to contain a lot. But as we get more and more sophisticated, your games will almost entirely be in the head, and there'll be very little in the body. Very basic pages go the other way around. In very basic pages, we put everything in the body, and there's not much in the head. There are two things that typically go in the header area. We have the meta care set business and the title. Okay, let's talk about this meta care set and the HTML lang biz, both of them. There are two parts that are required in HTML5. Now, if you've learned some XHTML strict, there was a bunch of other stuff, and it was nasty. It was impossible to memorize. This is a little bit tricky, but you either memorize it or use a template. I'll give you one if you want to. You can copy and paste my code. It's not hard to learn. But both line 2 and line 4 do something similar. What they both do is they help the browser choose which characters to display. In US means I'm going to write in English, US, and UTF-8 is a technical term for a character set that will also display US, English, and a few Western European characters. So both of those, line 2 and line 4, both of those tags have some attributes, that is, some characteristics that help the browser figure out how is it going to display this page. I have worked with friends in languages that do not use English, and I've worked on some multilingual pages. I actually worked with a university that's trilingual in Macedonia, and I have good friends at a university in China where I teach sometimes, and of course their pages are often bilingual. And so a lot of times you'll use these tools to help the browser figure out, hey, what characters do I need to upload? It can be, once you get used to it, it's just automatic. Okay, so what does the title do? Well, the title is interesting because what that does is it helps the browser understand what this page is going to be about. Now, the title is typically used in a couple of ways. One way it's used in modern browsers is that it goes on the tab. So modern browsers all have tabs. The title will show up in the tab, so you can tell which page is in which tab. The other place that you'll see titles a lot is when we put this online, somebody searches for our web page, then the title is what they'll search for. I'm not going to recommend you put things online yet. For now, I would say work on your local desktop, just store it somewhere on your local system, and then load it straight into your browser. Once we get a little more experience, we'll talk about working with a web server and putting things online, particularly as we move to mobile development where that step is necessary for testing. For now, let's just stay on the desktop. It's a lot easier. So the title is pretty sensible. That helps me know, all right, what's going on. As a convention in this course, typically the title will also be the file name. That way, if you get lost, you're looking at a video and you're trying to figure out what am I looking at yet, you can use the title to figure out what the file name is. In normal web development, the title is usually more human readable, but that's a convention that I've adopted for books and videos because I think it makes it a little bit easier for people. Okay, so inside the body, that begins on line 7 and ends on line 15. Now you notice that I've indented the stuff inside the header, I've indented the stuff inside the body. That's not the law, but it's a really good idea. As you'll see, things can get complicated pretty fast, and indentation is a great way of helping you understand what's going on. Hey, I'm inside a body, I need to make sure I end it. I'm inside a paragraph. It turns out you can have stuff nested inside each other. It can get pretty hairy pretty quickly. So we really like the ability to clean things up a little bit, use indentation to know what's happening. Okay, so here in the body we've got two main tags. We've got an H1 tag and a P tag. Well, the H1 stands for Headline Level 1. It doesn't mean first headline. It means, hey, this is the boldest, most powerful headline that I know how to do. Now, so exactly what font is that? Exactly what color is that? How is that centered? Turns out we don't know. Oh, sure, we can look at it, but we're not saying those things. I'm not saying make it blue, make it centered, make it a Comic Sans MS font. No, I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, hey, make it headline level 1, and later I will worry about exactly how that looks. See, HTML is not about describing how things look. It's about describing how they mean. If I were in charge, I would call it hypertext meaning language, because HTML is not about how things look. It's about how they mean. So I mean for Adventures of Goo Goo to be a level 1 headline. And I don't care right now how it looks. This happens in publishing too. When I write a book, I'll say, hey, this is a headline level 1. Now sometimes I write for one series that may make them a certain font and a certain size. Sometimes I'm writing for a different publisher that uses totally different conventions. Do I care when I'm writing the book? No, I just say, hey, that's a level 1 headline. So actually this is really sensible. Once you get used to it, you'll really like it. Okay, P stands for paragraph. And all of the ordinary text on a web page typically goes inside a paragraph / paragraph pair. I'm going to really push you on this. If you've done some older school web development, you might have ignored paragraphs and used something called BR instead. And I'm going to say that's not a good way to go. Let's go ahead and do it right. Put all of your text inside a container. It's going to make it much easier for you to manage things later. So I make a paragraph, so a P and a /P pair to indicate my paragraph. And as you save this, so if I'm working in an editor, I'll bring the editor back, I would take this thing and I would save it somewhere, maybe on the desktop, maybe somewhere else. You save your file, and then you pull up your browser. I'm recommending, again, Google. And then you can either use the file command to open up that thing, or you can just drag it from your desktop over. Either one is perfectly fine as long as you make it work. At least early on in these days when we're doing HTML, that's fine. You can just drag a file over into your browser and you'll be able to see it. It's not very pretty, but you can see what it did. Adventures of Goo Goo is showing up as a level 1 headline. It does differentiate enough that I can tell what it's trying to do. And You Are Goo Goo, an Intrepid Adventurer is in a paragraph. Now it automatically formats things a little bit. The size is not actually guaranteed. I can change it with the Control plus and Control minus keys. And in fact, I will do that so that even in the video you can sometimes read things more easily. But it is doing that. Now soon we'll make it look better. But for now, review this and make sure that you can build a web page that contains an H1 and a paragraph. Take a look. The title is also showing up where it ought to. You may not be able to see that in this example, but the title is showing up in the tab as well. Okay, try this and come back in the next section and we'll talk about how to add images to our pages to make things even cooler. See you then. Bye-bye.